Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us and for waiting in the room for the past 20 minutes. Glad you made it. My name is Mattia. I'm really excited to be with you today and to be here with Aimee. We're going to do the proper introductions in a moment. We're here today for a crash course for journalists, which I hope you all are, on AI and machine learning. There was not an S there in the title, so it's not machine learnings. I just noticed now. Good to know.
Many things to learn.
So, as I was saying, I'm going to let Aimee start and introduce herself first.
Hi, everybody. My name is Aimee Rinehart. I currently work at the Associated Press on its Knight-funded project to look at what local newsrooms need in artificial intelligence solutions and automations. How's that? Okay, great. I've been there for the past year. Before that, I am a print person by training and quickly switched into digital in the mid-90s and have kind of been there ever since.
And as I said, my name is Mattia, and I work for a project called JournalismAI at the London School of Economics and Political Science. As you can tell from my accent, I'm Italian, as many of you in the room, but I live in London working with Professor Charlie Beckett, who is here with us, and a distributed team that includes Sabrina in Italy and Lakshmi in India. Our work started 4 years ago, and it's a project entirely funded by the Google News Initiative with the aim of helping news organizations understand artificial intelligence and machine learning technologies, how they can be used, and especially how they can be used responsibly. Everything that we do, just a quick brag, it's at journalismai.info, so that URL will redirect you to our website where you can find literally every link to work we have done so far, and also some announcements that we just made this morning about our new programs. For today, on the agenda, we have 3 parts for you. I hope that in the 50 minutes we're going to try to get through everything as speedy as possible. So we're going to look first at some of the key concepts and definitions around AI and machine learning. Then we're going to talk about use cases a little bit, so how these technologies are already used in a journalistic context. And then we're going to look specifically at local and small newsrooms and how they can use AI and the framework that the AP has developed, and that Aimee will go through that for us. So, as you know, there is no Q&A, so if you actually do have questions and you cannot make your voice heard, you can tweet us directly, so you can find our Twitter handles online, or you can also join our Telegram group at t.me/journalismai, and you can post your questions there. Our phones are here. Ernest is here to support us, so we will be checking all your questions during the session. Last thing, in terms of housekeeping, again, no Q&A here. If you do want to talk and have some questions, we can just go to the bar later as we're done with the session and grab a coffee together. Good. Let's dive in. So, I'm going to take this first part, and I just noticed as I was preparing these slides how things have changed. In 2019, the last time that Perugia was here, AI wasn't a category in itself in the program, but it was just together with audio and video and voice and VR, lots of technologies that are different. And probably 2 or 3 sessions were actually about artificial intelligence. While this year we have, I think, 10 sessions in the program specifically about AI, which I would totally recommend you to follow, not only because 2 of those sessions are ours, and Charlie will be speaking as well, but also because there are a lot of incredible people telling you about how AI can be used and how we should report on artificial intelligence as well. So this is to show how much artificial intelligence has become an important topic for journalism over the past few years. Then let's try to get some definitions. At this point, I would love to have a conversation with you to understand what you already know about AI, what are some of your thoughts around the topic. We cannot do that, so bear with me as I try to go through some simple introductory thoughts, and we can talk through everything later. Something that I think it's very important for all of us to remember is that AI is not the future. We use it every day. Artificial intelligence is behind some of the tools we use every single day in our daily lives, from social media, like TikTok and Instagram, to the recommendations we get on Spotify and Netflix, the direction you get on Google Maps, when you search things on Google. Even the spam filter on your email account has some artificial intelligence deciding what spam is and is not. So that is an important clarification to start with, and also that leads us into this key separation that you should all keep in mind at the start, because the source of a lot of misunderstanding around artificial intelligence is that we tend to think of artificial general intelligence, which is the idea of machines that can be made to think and function as human mind. This is science fiction, is Robocop, is a lot of other sensuous beings with a robotic body that we see in movies. This doesn't exist, maybe will exist, maybe will never exist. So when we talk today about artificial intelligence in journalism, we instead are talking about artificial narrow intelligence, which is machines' ability to perform a single task, many different tasks, but still a single one at a time, extremely well, even better than us. And this is how we want to remember what AI is during the next 50 minutes. In terms of a definition, there are many. First of all, unfortunately, there is not a completely agreed definition in academia about what is artificial intelligence. So take this as our favorite definition, the one that we as a team decided to embrace, which explains AI as a collection of ideas, technologies, and techniques that relate to a computer system's capacity to perform tasks normally requiring human intelligence. It's a mouthful, I know. A lot of things to unpack in here. So let's try to think of this in two separate ways. The second part, the computer system capacity, blah, 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 it's fairly common. You find a lot of definitions of AI that describe artificial intelligence this way. What I personally found extremely useful when I approached the topic, which I should have said like 5 minutes ago, I'm not an expert in artificial intelligence. I didn't study data science. I am a journalist and a project manager that is trying to help newsrooms understand what I have been understanding on the way. And what I love of this definition is describing AI as a collection of ideas, technologies, and techniques, because it really explains the nature of artificial intelligence as a scientific discipline. You should think of AI as biology of mathematics. Within the field, there is technology. There are a lot of ideas that may become technology in the future. There are different techniques, but the technology is just the final manifestation of a very complex field.
Thank you. So for our purposes at AP, when we decided to survey local newsrooms, we broke down artificial intelligence. There's lots and lots and lots of definitions of it, as Mattia said, but for our purposes, we looked at 4 sections or 4 categories of artificial intelligence, and one is machine learning, to do things like identify audience trends, natural language generation to automate article writing, natural language processing to do things like caption videos, and computer vision for spotting keyframes. And Meredith Broussard is an academic, also a practitioner of journalism, and has said again and again, AI is a subfield of computer science. That's really important to note. So then how do we get this, this highfalutin artificial intelligence name? As my friend Jason Eby likes to say, nobody ate soybeans until we called them edamame. So this is one of those things, it's a fancy word to wrap around, but what we're really talking about is a subfield of computer science.
Love that one. I'm going to steal it from you, Amy, in future presentations. So I just wanted to look at a couple of concepts in here that are mentioned in this definition, starting from machine learning, because it's hard to understand. It was for me, to be honest, 4 years ago, to understand what is AI and what is machine learning, because they are very often used as synonyms. And something that probably academics would cringe at hearing me say, it's fine if you use them as synonyms, because often they are, at least when you're trying to introduce yourself to the topic. But more specifically, machine learning is a subfield of artificial intelligence, which means that not everything that is AI is machine learning, while everything that is machine learning is a part of the field of AI. And specifically, this refers to the use of algorithms, we're going to come back to that word as well in a second, that learn patterns from data and are able to perform tasks without being explicitly programmed to do so. Now, the last part is the key part here, because there is a lot of automation that we use every day that is not artificial intelligence, because that automation starts from code where we ask the software to do specific things, and we just say, if you see this situation, do this. If you find yourself in this other situation, do that. That is automation, but it's not artificial intelligence, because it doesn't include the being without being explicitly programmed to do so. So machine learning is really about taking data, feeding it to this machine learning model, and the model learns from the data itself what we're asking it to do without us having to explain an instruction list like a cooking recipe. talking about algorithms, what an algorithm is, instead, you could honestly think about it as a cooking recipe, because it's a series of steps that is undertaken in order to solve a particular problem or to accomplish a defined outcome. So when you hear about algorithms, obviously, we tend to think about the very fancy social media algorithms that power Twitter and Netflix and everything else. But at the end of the day, we're talking about a series of steps taken in order to solve a problem or accomplish a defined outcome. So that's what it used in the machine learning field, which means AI. Very briefly, I don't want to go through the whole history of artificial intelligence, which is long, but when I started approaching this topic 4 years ago, honestly, I was asking myself, what is all this buzz about artificial intelligence? Why last year I never heard of it, and in the past few years, we hear about artificial intelligence all the time. You read articles about it and news innovation and so on. This is mostly due to a combination of two things, which is, on one side, the availability of data, that all of us as human beings, we produce an incredible amount of data every day. Different sources will tell you different specific amounts. Someone says a few megabytes every second or a few gigabytes every hour. I don't know that. But if we think about algorithms that they need data to perform tasks, well, that's how now it's possible, and a lot more is possible than before, because we are producing more and more data. At the same time, the computing power in these little things here and in the bigger computers has been increasing exponentially, so that we can use that data in a fast way so that immediately we can get the responses. So this is kind of the two factors that combine to give us the hype around AI that we have today.
Yeah, and so one of the biggest problems is the demand for news exceeds our ability to produce it. And I think we can all agree for ourselves, we have a hard time sorting information. What do we look at? Is it Twitter? Is it WhatsApp? Is it your news app that you're reading? Where is our attention? And the thing for something on a grand scale would be like the Panama Papers. AI was great at sifting through and sorting information so reporters all around the world could report on it. On the local level, how this looks is if you're a reporter at the Jersey Journal, and that publishes 6 days a week to an audience of 3,000, you cover 12 municipalities. One of those municipalities has delivered an 850-page document for its meeting agenda. That is not transparency. 850 pages of one meeting, and you've got that 11 more times. And what they're doing is they're burying a 7% pay increase for city workers in that information. How do you sort through that if that is one of the 12 things you have to report on that day? And this locally is how AI can come to bear and really help reporters at the local level.
So this is kind of the end of the first part of this presentation, where we run through some very basic concepts. And I hope it was helpful for you to understand a little bit more of really what we're talking about, and in general to bring back some definitions that can help you, also talk with technology colleagues that you may have in the newsrooms about the topic. So let's go now through how this is actually used in journalism, which I guess is what you're very curious to know here in the room. So AI can help you across the journalistic process nowadays. This is a categorization that is due to the fantastic team at the AP. So we are honestly stealing it from them all the time with permission. So AI can help you really in different ways across the process of producing journalism, from the news gathering to the production to the distribution of news. Your newsroom, for example, in a news gathering situation, regularly has to sort through data to find specific events or transcribe audio and video, engages in fact-checking. These are all examples where AI and machine learning can be used to support the work of the journalist. In the production, maybe you have to create stories from structured data on a regular basis. Some articles need to be localized to be specific and useful for different regions that are affected differently by a certain piece of news, or you want to convert text to audio and the other way around. And finally, also in the news distribution. So once the news is created, machine learning can help you if you want to make better article recommendations. So the idea, okay, you have read one article now on my page, stay on my page and read something else that we're offering you. More relevant ads as well, that from a business point of view is incredibly important, and personalized landing pages, for example. Now, we're going to go through a few more examples, more in detail now, but we just wanted to offer you a fairly complete overview of this.
Yeah, so when AP has explored AI and worked with AI, we usually work with third parties that have their own development team, and that has been enormously helpful to do things like automated text generation. So we worked with automated insights on that, and in 2014 we used it for earnings reports. And what that meant is we went from producing 300 earnings reports to 3,000 earnings reports. And many of the reporters at the beginning were really worried, is my job going away because of this? And actually, their jobs didn't go away. They got to do bigger analysis pieces around those earnings reports and to do other reporting topics. So we really alleviated, not the burden, but certainly the stress of producing so much information around those topics. We also work on summarization with Agolo, video transcription services, event detection through things like Samdesk, and image recognition as well. So those are some of the ways AP has worked with third parties to explore what's possible with artificial intelligence. And we've also looked at these categories because one of the things that we discovered when we were talking to local newsrooms was that, they said, we don't know what we need. And if you think about your whole news operation, it is a little overwhelming to think about, like, you look around and the need is everywhere. So how do you focus? This is how AP has focused, and this is how we're recommending local newsrooms see this issue of identifying the right technology for each section of their newsroom. So we look at it: news gathering, news production, news distribution. We've added a fourth with business side needs that often overlaps with news distribution in a way that really hasn't been traditional in most newsrooms, or at least print newsrooms, where those were always seen as distinct. But many times business side interest, which is keeping people on the site longer, having more information about them so you can personalize, also fits into the news distribution component too. So we're seeing lots of overlaps. And the word bubble above that is all the different ways that artificial intelligence that we've experienced can help with newsrooms.
So just to go through a few specific examples to give you an idea, and also kind of to give you a sense of how many organizations are already using AI, and especially the fact that it's not just the biggest players. So it's not only for the New York Times and the BBC to be able to use AI, but there are many others doing interesting experiments and actually using AI on a day-to-day basis. So I selected a couple of examples for each of the three buckets of news gathering, production, and distribution that we discussed. And I want to start with a news gathering with the example of using machine learning for text analysis. And this is extremely valuable for investigative journalists. Aimee referenced the Panama Papers a moment ago. I had quite a few conversations with people working on the Panama Papers, and they were saying, if only we had already more developed machine learning tools at the time, we would have discovered even more stories in that trove of documents that was given to us. And they put that to use. So when they received another leak, from a law firm in the Mauritius Islands. They started working on the Mauritius leaks, and they asked for the support of the Quartz team in the US, which at the time had a fantastic Quartz AI studio team that unfortunately doesn't exist anymore, but did a fantastic job over 2018 and 19. And Quartz used AI to help the reporters search through the documents. What does it mean this concretely is that machine learning has the ability to being given a big set of documents, as a leak in this case, and if you find an example, and again, it starts from the human, going through these documents and finding an example of something that is interesting, you can then ask the technology, find me documents that are similar to this, find me similar stories, or find me the repetition of this individual that is mentioned probably 100 of times in these documents, but I don't have the time to go through page by page of 1,000 documents, each one of them 100 pages long. So that's where technology can help you. Again, it doesn't do what you are supposed to do. It just helps you do your job in a more efficient way. And if this is valid for text analysis, it's also valid for images and computer vision. This is a bit of an outdated example. It's from 2018, but it's still dear to my heart. And I love to bring it in this situation. Leprosy of the Land was an investigation made by Texty, an incredible team of data journalists in Ukraine that, of course, nowadays are going through a very tough situation, and we've been thinking of them a lot over the past few weeks. What they did in 2019 was to train a machine learning model, and again, we're talking about a very small team here, not a big newsrooms with loads of money, to recognize examples of amber mining in satellite imagery. Now, amber mining, I didn't know, you probably don't know either, illegal version of this is a huge issue in Ukraine, especially in the forest in the northwest. So what they did here, amber mining leaves some specific holes in the ground that can be seen through satellite imagery, as you can maybe see very small here. You can train a machine learning model to go through satellite imagery much faster than obviously we humans could do, and recognize all of these examples and present them to you, so then the journalists were able to see these images and analyze, are these legal amber mining examples that we're aware of, or are these illegal amber mining examples that instead should be reported? And this investigation was fantastic and brought the government to take action and trying to stop these examples of illegal amber mining there. So I think it's a fantastic example of using the technology for a very specific way by a small team that didn't have great resources, just decided to try and test things out for very important reporting, environmental reporting that then makes an impact. In the news production phase, as Aimee said, there are plenty of examples here, and the earning reports that AP has been pioneering from the start were one great example of this. I tried to add a couple of more creative and maybe unexpected examples here. This is one from Swedish radio, so the public radio in Sweden, which is a fantastic team that actually Charlie was just visiting the other day. And they do a lot of experiments in partnership with the European Broadcasting Union, and this is one of them. And in this case, they didn't use a peach as the fruit, but it's a tool that they named Peach for some reason, to sift through their archives and find content to be recommended to their journalists during the news production. Now, Swedish Radio, as many other public media institutions, have an incredible archive of decades of content that has been produced that mostly just sits there, and there is no use for it. With machine learning, you can train a model to sift through those archives, find out information that is relevant to the story you are producing at this very moment, and help you build context that your audience, your listeners or readers, if you are a print publication, can find useful, because maybe a story about the same topic was reported plenty of times during the past years. So you can sort of like give a snapshot of the previous episodes of the story to your readers without having to go to the archive and listen to pieces to find out manually where these stories were reported. Another great example here, which I find very creative, is a collaboration between The Guardian and AFP in France, which actually happened as part of one of our programs last year. The two teams of journalists and data scientists collaborated on using machine learning to understand quotes, which means that a team of data scientists built a model to be able to, also in this case, sift through the archives of The Guardian and AFP, and and they train the model to recognize what a quote is. So how do you look for a quote in an article? You know, everything that is within inverted comma or something else. So then they were able to use these quotes for fact-checking, for example. Maybe the Prime Minister in the UK was saying something new that day, and the machine learning model found out that 2 weeks before he said exactly the opposite about the same topic. Not saying that does happen, it does. So that's a very useful example. But also what is very creative that they did was to use this information to reflect on themselves, to see who are we quoting on these stories. For example, they found out that they are quoting, in many stories, they're quoting mostly men and not women. Or that for scientific stories, they have a very limited pool of experts that they tend to quote. And having this information, this data, help them reflect, okay, we can improve the way we do our journalism. We can make an effort to be more inclusive, to be more representative, and to get more voices represented in our stories. Finally, in the news distribution bucket, a couple of examples here of things that we mentioned before. Recommender systems, of course, can be powered by machine learning, as we hinted at. And this is an example from the South China Morning Post team in Hong Kong, which also worked with us on this project last year. And what they did was to build what they called a cross-section article network. So they started from a scientific paper that they read that was proving with limited data that readers that read articles of different sections of your newspaper, maybe business, maybe sport, maybe politics, and so on, tend to be the most loyal ones, more loyal than the ones that just read sports news, for example. So they built a machine learning model to recognize and categorize everything they produce, so to tag every article for the topic that is about and the section. And then the machine learning model, what it does is not to do the usual lazy recommendation of just telling you some more stories about the same topic that are about the same topic, but maybe you don't really care about. Instead, the model suggests you stories from different sections of the newspaper, trying to use also your previous scrolling behaviors and the stories you have read to understand what is most interesting for you. Obviously, this is useful for the readers because they get stories that are most interesting for you, but it's also business value because readers that stay more on your page probably are the same readers that are more likely to pay for your content if you are a subscription-based publication, for example. And talking about that, more to the business side, propensity models are also something that are helped by machine learning. And here we're really complementing the example before. This is one from Schibsted, one of the biggest publishers in the Nordics, in Europe. And really what it does is to collect responsibly data about their readers and how they consume content and what they read on their publications, and then get this information to be able to propose to adapt their paywall to the individual readers to maximize the likelihood of a single reader to pay for the content they produce. What else? I just wanted to say with this that as much as this is a very useful categorization that we use in all our presentations, it is partly artificial. Not all examples fall very squarely into news gathering or production or distribution. And a wonderful use case is comment moderation or pre-moderation, which up to you if you want to put it in news distribution or in news production, it doesn't really matter. But it's another great case where machine learning can help. In this example, El País used AI to make their comment section less toxic, which means that they trained a model to recognize words and expressions in their comment sections that can bring a toxic conversation, maybe insults to the journalist itself or to other readers. And what the model does is not to block these comments directly, but it helps the journalist. So it tells the journalist, these are the comments that as a model I think are potentially toxic, so you should pay more attention to these. Instead, these other comments, I didn't notice anything problematic, so you can probably let them go. What do all these examples have in common? I know we're going through a lot, and I understand that. So we can continue with questions later if you want to know more about any of them, but I just wanted to highlight that two important things. What these examples have in common is that they start from a problem. We're not talking about using AI because it's cool. Using AI because it's the new technology and we have to try it out. All these examples started from an organization having a problem and they wanted to find a solution, which AI was part of the solution they figured out. But it's important to always start with what you actually need. On the other side, data. All these stories are based on data. The images of undermining, the text of the leaks, the articles that you want to recommend. If you don't have data, artificial intelligence, machine learning, as we have seen before, is pretty much useless because you need data for the model to learn something from it. If you want to see more of these examples, we have on our website, again, journalismai.info, a database of more than 100 different case studies, including those that I just mentioned, where you can see really a vast range of publications trying to do some different things with machine learning. So I encourage you to check that out.
Aha. Local, my favorite topic. The project that I work on is a Knight Foundation-funded topic. So it's very US-centric. So the examples, we only surveyed US newsrooms. The examples we have are only from the US. That doesn't mean it's not applicable to you. I think where Mattia's group really looks at national and international newsrooms, we have the local slice, and together it's a very nice blend of information and a lot of overlap too. So we're working together with the Brown Institute, who's looking at paywall, smart paywalls, New York City Media Lab, and Partnership on AI taking on the ethical considerations for journalists. And I'm just going to use this now. So our project is working in 3 phases. The first phase was information collection. we didn't want to come in and just say, this is what local newsrooms should do. We really wanted to see where were the pain points for local newsrooms and how could we help. And there were a lot of things that we didn't know that we know better now. So the information collection, we had almost 200 local newsrooms from Maine all the way to Alaska. Every single state participated. We also had Puerto Rico, DC, and Guam that took the scorecard. And it was across all mediums, so included broadcast, digital only, print, and of course everybody meets sort of on the web at this point. From that 200, we selected 25 newsrooms that we had with the help of Night Lab students at Northwestern University. We interviewed 25 of them for a much deeper look at how they're using technology and what their trepidation was toward using it. That was really informative, and in the report that I'll talk about later, we really were able to come up with these really nice profiles, I think, that showed all the different constraints that are leading to them not being able to experiment with AI. So we went in with the assumption that, and operating under what the Reuters Institute came up with every year, and this past year it was that there's a growing divide of technology between local and international newsrooms. That was the hypothesis, and that is actually what our research bore out. But it's not because they don't want to. A lot of it is down to a lack of any cushion that is required to experiment. Experimentation requires risk, and risk often means failure. AP hasn't batted it out of the park every single effort that we've made, but we have that cushion to experiment that locals just simply don't have. So it also requires the capacity of staff and a strong foundation in current technology, time and money. Those were all constant things that people kept talking about. Staff turnover is high. Again, from the 25 newsrooms and news leaders who we spoke with, we got 7 messages bounced back within 2 months. So in November, we concluded our research with them. In January, we went back and said, good news, we've got a report coming out. And we got 7 bounce backs, 2 retirements, 2 women who left the industry entirely. They were all a variety of reasons, but they just don't work at that newsroom anymore. One of the newsrooms we spoke with from Washington said, we asked them what their staff skills was, and she said, I don't know. Like, we had 7 new people start last week. So in terms of staff turnover, and maybe I see some heads nodding, that might be your situation too, where you just can't retain people, especially the people who have an interest in technology. There's also the news leaders said, I don't know if this technology is actually going to work. I don't want this to become a distraction for our news team who has to produce articles or we just aren't able to get our job done. So I'm going to do a conference on content management systems because I think everybody would come to it and everybody would like to talk about how bad theirs is, how outdated theirs is, how it doesn't function. Only one newsroom that we spoke with was in Puerto Rico said, we love our content management system. Everybody else said, how can we add more technology on top of a wobbly system? How can we do that? And that is also, the variance of content management system is preventing a lot of scalability when it comes to artificial intelligence and tools in general. So if we could all get on one system, it would be enormously helpful in terms of offering tools to newsrooms. But newsrooms decided long ago to go it alone, and this is kind of the problem that we've created ourselves. So innovation requires customizing off-the-shelf products. As soon as someone hears the word GitHub, everybody shuts down. You need to have somebody in the newsroom who can tweak and adjust and customize even off-the-shelf software. So sometimes it's just a non-starter for many, many newsrooms. And again, as I mentioned, some experiments fail. Failure can sink a local newsroom, and they just don't have the tolerance for it. So back to our rubric, the news gathering. Transcription tools are seen as ability to reduce the workloads. Government doc alerts to keep watch over more government agencies. Social media monitoring could also be used to stay on top of content discovery. Again, this is for the local level. Production tools to generate and optimize and schedule social media. Automate page layouts for print newsrooms. Automate writing for briefs like high school reports and weather. Suggesting photos, videos, audio to match the text to stories. On the distribution part, audience analytics to help newsrooms create a way to personalize the news and advertising, and some requested SMS alerts. And content moderation systems, as Mattia was mentioning, that could help newsrooms deal with audience feedback. Many newsrooms only use Facebook as their source of comments, because they said at least the onus is on Facebook to moderate that. They had other things to say about the platforms, but that is the one thing they said that has been hugely helpful. One person said that they deactivated their comments because they couldn't stand the vitriol anymore. So that's how people are balancing this. The good news is, you might have, as I was giving these examples, you're like, but Aimee, there's social scheduling platforms that exist, and there's audience analytics. Yes. There's a solution for all of these things. But again, for local newsrooms, they're like, there's 10 solutions. Which one do I use? And how do I use it? So we, with Ernest Kahn, who is sitting over here, he's my co-author on this report that we released that has all of these details in it. We have designed a course. Let's see here. There. So we've designed an online course that starts next week for local newsrooms. And the idea is to walk them through very simple procedures and tools that could help them leverage the artificial intelligence in their newsroom. And also, a lot of what it comes down to for local news is simple automation. They don't need artificial intelligence. And automation, as Mattia was saying, that calendar reminder you set up every year so you don't forget your sister's birthday, that is an automation. And that is exactly what is needed at the local level. So, one of the things, again, getting back to the framework, because it's a big topic and there's no lack of need in every single direction, probably in your newsroom too. The thing that we want to target, and in the center of this, is repetitive tasks. That is absolutely one of the things local newsrooms said, I'm sorry, I don't know AI. I was like, please, no apologies. I don't either. So what do we know? We know that certain things are annoying us. I don't want to type community calendar events anymore. That is an annoyance that can be solved through automation. So you really want to go through your newsroom, and if you can't think about it through the news gathering, production, distribution, business side, think about what's getting in your way of doing what you need to do. So once you identify those repetitive tasks, you want to look through and does it uphold our values as a newsroom? Can you identify staff skill sets? Who's going to power this? Who's going to be in charge and keep up with it? You should set limits. Most newsrooms said it's fine for AI to carry us 80% of the way to publish, but that last 20% has to be a human who decides. We don't want something to just go live and have that out there. And then protecting data. So understand how the AI processes data to avoid automation revealing details that shouldn't be published. In the US, if somebody is a victim of a rape, we don't publish the victim's name. You know, so that is one of the things. Or minors, for example. AI doesn't know that. You know, AI doesn't like, what gender is it? How old are they? That is a human being. And again, the things that we're looking at is information, automating and outsourcing to AI, simple information. Getting sources, analysis, writing, those are only things that can be done by humans, and I don't see in the near future or even long term that a robot is going to be able to do that. So up next for us, we're doing the training, as I mentioned, for next week. Then we will consult with up to 5 newsrooms for a year on assessing what they need. Sometimes newsrooms said, I only need the school lunch menu for the public schools to be published. And I'm like, okay, I can have that done by lunchtime. What else do you need? So we really want to go into a newsroom and see what else could be identified, and then implement those tools and assess after the year. And hopefully the projects that we choose have an eye towards scalability. Great, it works in the Ouray County Plain Dealer in Colorado, perfect. How else can it scale to other newsrooms? So at ai.ap.org, you can find out the link to the report, but also to the class.
Thank you, Aimee. So then, in the last few minutes, we just wanted to review a little bit kind of these points and kind of summarize some of the things we said in a very key and easy to use list of bullet points for you in terms of like if you're thinking of using AI in your organization and thinking where to start. So This is a strategy in 7 steps, and yes, strategy is a bit of a grand word here. It's considering it a roadmap, maybe, kind of like Google Maps giving you the direction, but not telling you exactly what you're going to find on the way. So, first of all, as we said, hopefully plenty of times I would say during this conversation, define your objective. If the starting point is I want to use AI, but you don't know why, you're starting with the wrong foot already. This is all about, I have this problem, I'm an investigative journalist, for example, and I need help going through these documents that I've been given. That's an objective. That's a specific problem you want to solve, and it must start there. At the end, the second point, what we tried to do today, but obviously this was clearly not enough, make sure that you understand all of the key concepts and definitions. We mentioned a lot of words during these few minutes: artificial intelligence and machine learning, natural language processing and generation, algorithms, automation. We hope we have done a good job at giving you an introduction, but obviously I encourage you to kind of again look a bit more into them to make sure you understand what we're dealing with. Explore existing use cases more. So again, if you want to try to do something, it's very likely that someone else has tried to do it already. So use our case studies database, do some research online. Journalists are very generous in the field of AI, we have learned, when it comes to sharing their knowledge and what they're learning and failing at sometimes as well. So reach out to people and understand what is possible already. Then find out what data you need and collect it in a responsible way. There is no going beyond this 4th point if you don't do it properly. As we said, machine learning, AI needs data. The type of data changes depending on what you have to do, but make sure that you have the data you need, you have enough data, and you know how that data has been sourced. If you have collected that data, make sure you have done it in a responsible and respectful way of people's privacy and so on. If you're getting data from someone else, you must know what data is in there, because we don't have time to go through the problems with bias a lot, and I know there was a question about it from the audience as well, but if you use data that has bias inside, the machine learning models will just replicate and multiply that bias. They don't understand that there is something wrong there. It's just numbers for them. Technology, so again, figured out what kind of software models you need, and also see how you can go about this. Some organizations, like AP in this case, they work with other organizations, if I'm saying it correctly, so maybe they buy available tools and work with those in the newsrooms. Others prefer to build everything in-house. So there's not right or wrong here. You need to figure out what's possible for you. And there's also a third option that it tends to go unnoticed sometimes, which is find someone to partner with. There are lots of university, academic labs, and research centers that develop these tools, and they're dying to get a newsroom to work with them so they can actually use in a practical way the tools they have just created in their academic lab. Don't underestimate this option, because it's usually a cost saving, and you get also to help kind of the field developing itself. Think about the skills you need. As we said, and as you probably have a feeling right now, this is complicated. After working for years on this topic, I still cannot train a machine learning model by myself. I'm not a technician. I would need to get training in data science. So what do you need in your team, and how can you get it? Maybe you need to hire the right people, or maybe there is somewhere in your newsroom that you can train and help them get the training they need to develop the skills that then will allow you to use this technology. And last, again, reflect on the risks that you may encounter and how to mitigate them. This is an incredibly important step. We could have another session 1 hour long only about this. There's a problem with bias, there is a problem with privacy and how the data is collected. There are a lot of risks we use in this technology. There are cultural risks, editorial risks as well that need to be considered. Keep this in mind from the start, and before you use it, you need to have a strategy on how to mitigate any problems that may arise.
Yeah, and just one thing to build on what Mattia said, especially around technology. There were several people who participated in our survey who said, we count on projects like yours. We count on projects like JournalismAI that offer these technology partnerships to build out projects, and also local universities. She said we would be dead in the water in terms of trying to do any innovation without those projects. So even if your local university hasn't advertised that they have technologists on staff, most do, and they would be eager to help, particularly in the months of June, July, and August. journalist. So just to keep that in mind in terms of what your projects are, that's an enormous and valuable resource. Those people often go on to very high-paying jobs at the platforms. Get them now when they want to make a name for themselves, and give them something purposeful to work on.
Well said. So we have 5 minutes and a few questions. So I wanted to mention a few things that may directly address those questions, but again, then we can continue talking about this outside. We also have written our own report, authored actually by Professor Beckett, by Charlie here, and everything we do starts from here. So in 2019, we interviewed as well more than 70 newsrooms across the world in 32 countries, asking them really what they were doing with AI, not only the examples, but also like what were they learning from the experiments, what were their fears about how the technology may impact the journalism industry, and also the expectations about how this technology can help them. So you can find the report and read it for free as journalismai.info, so make sure to check that out as well. And there are many takeaways in our report, but I just want to highlight 3 key things that we have identified at the end as needs for the industry in order to really benefit from these technologies. And also what we're doing to try to help in this regard. So there is a great need to change structures and culture in newsrooms, and especially to get the technical skills and technical understanding that we need. And we try to do that. Again, our mission is to make this knowledge accessible to journalists around the world and to mitigate the inequalities. Yes, the New York Times doesn't need my team to help them with AI. Many small newsrooms around the world may need this kind of information to understand where to start. So we have been hosting a festival for a couple of years, online of course, because of the pandemic. So on the Polis LSC YouTube channel, you can find all those videos for free. I think there are like 50 videos talking about different aspects of AI from journalists that have been doing the thing. And we also have a newsletter and a Telegram channel that I encourage you to join. Again, all the links are on the website, so you can find them there. Then again, there is a great need for education and training. As Aimee said, AP has a fantastic training coming up soon. We also have some free resources that you can use online. So on the website, you will find our AI Journalism Starter Pack, which is honestly just a Google Doc with a collection of links and easily signposted so that you can find what you need and see how others have gone by with this. And we also have 2 courses on machine learning on the training center of the Google News Initiative. Again, all links at journalismai.info, so you don't need to search on Google. We have 2 courses. One is an introduction to machine learning that tells you a bit more of what we discussed in these few minutes together. And there is also a hands-on course where we work with Texty, the Ukrainian data journalism agency I was mentioning before. And you can really learn with a small experiment how to train yourself a machine learning model with a Google tool to recognize images. So it's really accessible. Obviously, it's not going to make you an expert in machine learning within a few minutes, but I hope there was a question about it from the audience. It will help you understand that this is accessible for every one of you. You don't need the big money of the big organizations to learn to train a model.
Yeah, Luca and Sam have a question about, is there any way for a freelance journalist to access the potential of AI? Yes. There is. There are several things. If I were a journalist working today, I would probably use a transcription service. They are not all perfect. There was a political article about if you're covering, certain governments, please do not use this, or at least because it's cloud-based, right? And technology companies sometimes, not always, but if security teams knock on their door, they're often eager to hand over the information. So just a caveat, but transcription services can be enormously helpful. I would use advanced Boolean queries to set up Google alerts, TweetDeck, of course, too. Those can be enormously helpful for breaking news. I'm trying to think of anything else that would be instantly helpful. Automated newsletters, if you have an RSS feed, you can drop that into a newsletter that could deploy without your reviewing it. I don't recommend that, but as a way to sort of take off that heavy lifting. So those are some of the ways, if I were a freelance journalist, I would jump right in. And this field is all about exploring, and I would be eager to see what you come up with to solve the problems that you're trying to deal with, whether it's getting your next byline or the beat that you're covering in particular.
Thank you, Aimee. The last takeaway that I want to mention, I know we're really up with 1 minute to go. We have learned that there is great potential for collaboration around this field because, again, we are all in our organizations limited in terms of what we can do on our own because of limited skills, because of limited money. Yes, it's a huge problem, limited time, and so on. So we are helping news organizations collaborate. As I mentioned in the example before on the quotes, The Guardian and the AFP, two big organizations, to be honest, coming together and collaborate on that. We're offering this opportunity to many other newsrooms through our program, and we actually launched earlier this morning a JournalismAI fellowship program for organizations, where again, we select pairs of journalists, so one editorial person and one technical person from the same organization to come together in a cohort with other pairs of other organizations from around the world and collaborate together on coming up with new ideas. We have been doing this in different formats that were called collab challenges over the past few years. I think I have a few slides with examples I wanted to mention, but we're over time. If you want to know more about them, I can tell you everything outside in the next few minutes. We have a guide on using AI and satellite imagery for storytelling, an incredible project about generating climate fact boxes with AI, so making climate change stories more accessible and understandable for everybody, and a tool called the Political Misogynistic Discourse Monitor that detects hate speech against women online on social media in several languages. I'm giving the sign that we're up. So these are our contacts on Twitter.
Yeah, and Mattia said we will be in the bar to talk and to drink whatever is available at noon. And also, in addition to us, Charlie Beckett will also be on hand, as well as Ernest Kung, our colleagues who know more about the space probably than us combined. So anyway, just to say we can continue the conversation either here or on one of our projects. But thank you guys for coming. It was wonderful to meet you all.
Thank you.